don't want to shift gears, but my hot button has been, not a surprise to those out there in Etherland, this immigration problem. We talked about that the other day at the fundraiser for you last Sunday. It's a real serious problem for this country, and not just for those folks that are on the border states. Do you have any comments about how we might try to get a handle on that, Congressman?
Yeah, first you got to have leadership. First you got to have people in Washington, D.C. who really want to fix the problem. You got to have people in Washington, D.C. that don't see the problem as a benefit to them and their party. And to be very honest with you, the party in power does not see illegal immigration as a problem because, quite frankly, they see it benefiting their party and their politics.
How?
Because they believe most of the people who come in this country, who eventually become American citizens, who have children, who automatically become American citizens when they're born here in our country, disproportionately will grow up to be and vote Democratic. Well, that's the fact of the matter.
Well, but as long as they're the immigrant themselves, the illegal immigrant themselves, they're going to vote for anybody.
Correct.
So you're going to wait a couple generations.
Well, one generation.
Yeah, right.
Well, one generation is still a lot of years. I don't know. Boy, that seems like we're packing up an awful lot of people for a vote that we may or may not get.
Well,
I don't know how anybody can look at that as a benefit. That's ridiculous.
Well, I would agree with you. But we've been struggling with this problem for decades, since the 80s. And, you know, as silly as that sounds, the 80s were 30 years ago. So that's really...
3 decades, okay.
Well, I'm upset with the federal government stepping on Arizona's toes. Arizona, they're down there. They're on the firing line.
Yeah.
And
well,
they ought to be getting some help, not hindrance.
Well, they're trying to make up for a federal government who's refused to take action.
Yes.
And they're doing what our Federalist principles allow for in our Constitution, which are states' rights, which are self-governance by states. And they're trying to protect their border, their people, and their budget, quite frankly, which is burgeoning from having to pay health care, education, and social services for people who are not legal residents of their state or, quite frankly, of this country. How do you fix it? Again, you have to have people who want to fix it, number one. Number two, you know, we've heard this before, but we've got to have real border security. Borders, not only just northern and southern, but also our ports. People should not be able to come in and out of this country without being documented and not being able to know who it is. It's not only an immigration problem, it's also a national security problem if you can't control it. And then, you know, we need a series of reforms. First of all, the idea that anybody who wants to come can come is completely bogus. When my great-grandparents came here from Germany, there were quotas. There's been quotas in our country for years, and there's quotas in almost every country. You can only allow so many people from each country in a given year.
Right.
But the problem is, right now, on the average, it takes 8 years to get a response on whether or not you qualify to become an American citizen. That's unacceptable. I don't care who you are, where you're trying to come from. It shouldn't take you 8 years to figure that out. So, obviously, the whole immigration and naturalization system needs to be overhauled, and that's one thing the federal government is terrible at doing. We're great at throwing money at things, but when it actually comes to changing how we deliver services, that's something where we struggle.
Same old business. How many people do you suppose bought in to the idea that the legislation in Arizona was just not going to work at all because it was interfering with the, quote, national program, unquote? What program is that it interfered with?
I'm not aware of any national program, quite frankly, and I think that's why my hat's off to Arizona for having the moxie to do something about it. And the idea that we're going to spend public money, tax dollars, to fight what other public officials have done to, in their best view for their constituents, is absolutely ludicrous. Look, do I think the president has every right to disagree with Arizona? Sure. He's an American citizen, and he's right to his opinion. Do I think the president of the United States has the right to go out and chastise and criticize him? Sure. He's got the bully pulpit of the White House and the free speech to do it. But, you know, just because you don't like a law, just because you don't like what the majority of a legislature or of a state has done, does not mean it's illegal. I mean, let's look at the state of Illinois. I served 4 years in the state legislature. Do you not think there were laws that were passed that I thought were harmful to the state? Laws that were passed that I thought were stupid and idiotic? Laws that I passed that I thought were unfair? Absolutely. That doesn't mean you sue the state of Illinois because the will of the majority prevails. That's called democracy. And so, again, we see a my way or the highway mentality, a very czar mentality out of the White House, which is, we're going to issue our edicts, and by God, you better follow them. And in the case of Arizona, they said thanks but no thanks. We believe in self-governance. We believe in the federalist principles that our country was founded on, and we believe that we have the responsibility and the authority to pass laws to govern our state. And the same thing with Illinois. You know, some people thought we were crazy for getting rid of Rod Blagojevich. Some people thought we gave him a bad rap, that the legislature shouldn't have impeached him. And you know what? Those people are entitled to their opinion. But guess what? In a democracy, in the rule of the majority, even in Illinois, when the legislature says, this guy's corrupt, this guy's no good, he needs to be impeached, it's the rule of the majority in the legislature. And so he was thrown out of office. And so I guess my point is that even in Arizona, the majority of the Arizona legislature, the governor of that state did what they thought was best for their state. You can disagree with them, you can run against them for election, you can try to unseat them to try and overchange the law, but you don't just go out and file lawsuits with public monies, expending public tax dollars to fight other public officials when you disagree.
I've got to turn to another issue. This stimulus program,
yes,
really has me absolutely baffled. Can you give any definitive results from this? Is it working? Is there any part of it that's working?
Well, let's look at the facts.
For the money expended.
Yeah, let's look at the facts. It's about $1 trillion. It's the largest spending bill in our nation's history. When the president was promoting it, he said two things. First, it was going to be the largest infrastructure investment since Eisenhower was president. Now, Eisenhower invented the interstate system, I mean, significant infrastructure. So as a member of the Transportation Committee, I thought, wow, you know, we're finally going to upgrade our roads and bridges, we're finally going to upgrade our rails, our waterways, our locks and dams, our airports, and this might be wise to borrow money to invest in that kind of infrastructure, long-term, adding to America's competitiveness around the world. The bill that passed, less than 8% of it went to infrastructure.
Repeat that, please.
Less than 8% of the $1 trillion stimulus bill went to infrastructure.
That be ocho for you who are speaking Spanish.
So where did the other 90% go?
I don't know.
It went to the states for their discretion. Well, what do you think the states did, like Illinois? Well, they shored up their budget. They said, thank you very much, it's Christmas in February. And so for the last year and a half, they have used this discretionary money to prop up budgets that, quite frankly, were not sustainable. They put off the painful cuts they should have made during the economic downturn that you and your family, quite frankly, most cities and county governments had to make. But that the state governments, thanks to the federal government, and the federal government themselves, thanks to deficit spending, have not made. And it's partly why, in a large part, why many folks like myself voted against the stimulus bill. Because we knew that more government spending on government jobs was not going to reinstill confidence in the private sector. And more importantly, it's those government jobs do not create long-term economic output. Rather, you need private sector growth to pay for, through tax revenue, those new government jobs. And so what has happened? Precisely what we predicted, which is the money's running out. And so what have the states done? They've come back to the federal government and said, we need more money. And if you followed what happened in Washington, D.C. last week, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, even though we were on an August recess break, rang the bell, and all 435 House members came running back to Washington, D.C. In a matter of 4 hours, we spent another $26 billion in a mini-stimulus for states so that they wouldn't have to lay off teachers, public employees, state workers, police officers, the like, for the next 6 months. Now, do I like to lay off teachers? Absolutely not. I started on a school board. Education funding is near and dear to my heart. Do I like to lay off state workers? Absolutely not. But guess what? Just like the states that don't have the money, neither does the federal government have the money. And at some point, you got to wake up and realize, number one, you can't keep spending more money on the same things and thinking you're going to get different results. That's the definition of insanity. And number two, you can't keep swiping the federal government's credit card and expecting someday, somehow, some magic's going to come and you're going to find a way to pay it off.